Hey, Dave Milenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a really, really tough question to start with. And just think about it for a second before you actually answer it to yourself, okay? Because I was like, oh, I'm fine on this one. And then I sat with it for a minute and I'm like, yeah, no. So the question is, when's the last time you doubted yourself? And I was like thinking about that, and I'm like doing, research for today's podcast. And then I start digging a little deeper, and I'm like, oh man, now I'm going to have to really get vulnerable today. So I'm ready to jump in. I'm honored to be hanging out with Alundas Havens. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you again. It's a tremendous honor, my friend.
Absolutely. You are the founder and CEO of Alpha Influence Media and the podcast host of The Winner's Paradigm. So, holy cow, that's a lot going on there. So, fill us in on what's going on?
Yes, sir. So it originally started last year, a week before my daughter was born. I started a podcast, The Winner's Paradigm, to really talk about recalibrating mindset. Because a little bit about me, tough upbringing, and I couldn't really process certain things just because my parents are narcissists, so they'd flip everything on me. They're alcoholics, racist stepdad. So it was one where like I had to fight the limiting beliefs on kind of how I viewed myself. So if I wanted to get a design in my hair just to get a design and be funny, my stepdad would be like, "No, you look like a hoodlum." So it was one of those to where it was challenging these beliefs, getting older, and then realizing it, and then even having my own daughter and realizing that if people don't want to have relationships with you and put the time invested into you, it's okay to say, hey, we're at this time, we're going to separate ourselves because they can't do anything, to extend their hand to you as you do to them. So it was one for me on that podcast to jam and just really talk about, the mindset side of the house and going A to Z and getting out the military and talking about just certain things I process and sit with. And then Alpha Influence Media is a podcast production, or media company. So we specialize in getting you booked on shows that resonate with your message. And then from there is we'll get you guests as well, but we're going to get you that video episode chopped up into like 4 or 5 different pieces you can share on social media. That
Sure.
way you're both able to put it on social media and kind of share it as a short form content.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to start out by saying thank you. You're a Marine vet, so thank you for your service. As we talked about before we jumped on, I have no clue what that's like. So just wanted to say thank you for protecting us, and thank you for running in the direction of the fire when we're running in the opposite direction of gunfire. So thank you for doing that. I'm assuming because it says Bam Bam, so I'm assuming that has something to do with your military background. So fill us in on, and who, I don't know. I don't want to call you Bam Bam. You kicked my ass. So I'm going to stay with Mr. Havens. But let's fill us in on what Bam Bam, how you got that name.
Absolutely. So that was my call sign kind of nickname that they give you. So for pilots, they do the call sign, but I've worked directly with the pilots because I ran the operations department for the MV-22 Ospreys. So it was one where we're on deployment in Kuwait, and we had a operations officer who kind of does the same thing as an operations officer in a business, which is funny. But he looks at me, and since I was a junior enlisted Marine, I was an E3. That means like you do whatever they tell you, whatever. Throw this trash away. He's like, "Hey, come fix this printer." I'm like, you know, you can't question these things. You just got to do. So I'm over there. He's like, "Smack it." So I'm smacking it. I smack this couple of $1,000 printer on the floor. It breaks. He's like, "Way to go, Bam Bam." And then everybody started laughing, and they're like, "You know what? That's funny because before we deployed, we had to draw these like mock targets, and it was simple. You just had to draw like a little dummy person, and I could not do that with chalk. And they're like, "Why are you breaking the chalk? Like, why are you getting upset?" And I was getting so mad because I couldn't do it. So then stuck, and then it kind of went into my personalities as well. I was my own boss then, so it was like I was always achieving. So it was one of those that I was like the nickname just worked perfectly.
Wow. So you're not the only one that probably on this podcast that take their solution to fix a printer is to hit it really hard, right? Because we think that must jigger some wire or something. So, oh my God. So Bam Bam. So you beat up office equipment. Well, thank you again for jumping on today. I think that, you asked a really tough question on your website, and I wanted to ask the listeners and I wanted to get your feedback. It says, how much longer are you going to stand mediocrity and unfulfillment before you decide it's time to go all in? When you wrote that, Alundas, what did you mean by that? What were you thinking at that time?
That is perfect to be able to pull that, and that's something I love talking about. Really, it was just like thinking about the legacy type deal, and that's where I was at. And it was, who do you want to be remembered by? What are you looking to do? One big thing was, hey, could you recall one day when you were younger and what that looked like as a kid? And they're like, could you pick up on the things your parents do? So I was like, one house, my dad was squared away. May have not been the best parent, but he was squared away in the gym every morning, working his butt off. Other house, they're drinking every single night. So whether if it's 2, 3, 4, 5 beers, it's still seeing them there. So that's something you remember of your
Yeah,
parents of doing that, no matter how much they worked. It's like, yeah, they were always drinking.
yeah,
So it was one of those things for me where I was looking, and then kind of, my story was repeating the same behaviors that I said I didn't want to. So me and the wife broke up before we got married, and we had a miscarriage, and that's where I, started taking care of her. And I was like, I can do this dad husband type thing. It seems pretty simple, before I jumped into it, and started
sure.
learning, in all that kind of trauma or belief systems, like all that stuff came out of marriage. So it was really like piecing that stuff together. Like, who do you want to be? In my case, like I want to be the best I can be for my kids. And yes, that means, being a good dad and doing that. But what does it mean as a man as well? It doesn't mean that I need to be macho to my kids and you need to act this way and, raise them the way I did. Cause again, I used to complain about it. I would talk about it. Oh, this is how it was for me. And then I go do to my kids. So it's one of those when you look at it and you're like, hey, how do I measure? There's a book by Clayton Christensen. It's called How Do I Measure? And it kind of talks about those things as the legacy type deal. So when I wrote that question, that's where it was at, is like I'm going through all these things in life and really being better on those areas. And it was something where I was like, man, if somebody else is going through that can help them.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it really will resonate with the listener today thinking about unfulfillment, because obviously we all have a definition of success, and you define it differently than I do, and I think that that's part of the advantage of success is we get to define it, but it's also obviously part of the problem, because if we are so unrealistic in our expectations of what success means, right behind that, I'm assuming, is that unfulfillment. So where did you start noticing unfulfillment in your life? I mean, was it in the military, before the military, after? Help us with that if you could.
So it was really after, to add context, I was at a mortgage brokerage first, and very difficult because I was like excuse me, I stopped drinking and then I really started drinking again there because we used to drink on Fridays and it was like a frat house. So first hit adversity, grandfather died right before that. And it was processing it because he was always that guy that cleaned everything up. Dad got into something, grandpa's there, he'd be there at graduations. Last year of life, me and him got close. On deployment, he's texting me about the Dodgers and the World Series, and I'm over there like just focusing on the mission. So it was cool getting the text messages because he was the only person doing that for me.
Sure.
In processing all that, going through this, having all these kind of thoughts, and then I got to a point where it was just looking back, and it was like, man, we keep saying one thing, or I would always try to go to somebody and get answers and how do I do this? But it was developing that stuff in myself to where it was like, I can be the one, since everybody's always coming to me anyway and asking for advice. Like, why can't I just read this book and apply it? Why can't I be better? Why can't I go all in on the business? So went to a point where I was holding the daughter, making sales calls and working 60, 80 hours, and I had to jump and go all in on the business. So it was something for me where it was like, you have to be able to do what you're passionate about, but take those risks, figure out, hey, what aligns with me. And went into me learning video editing because it was like, that's what the business needs. That would be perfect for what I do, where it's like, that's not even my trade, but I'm going to learn it and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and I can train somebody else. So it was something for me where it's like all these things, compile. And if it's in one area of life, it's a metaphor, it could be used in somewhere else. So it's something we often don't look at or see.
Sure. And I think that, yeah, we're going so fast in life that there are times where you're not going to see unfulfillment. You're not going to notice it, right? So I think like I envision like taking inventory of myself to really kind of sit with rather than going so fast where I just miss a lot of that. I've been trying in my life to slow down and take inventory because am I fulfilled in this area, but not, unfulfillment is not an all or nothing, right? I mean, you can be fulfilled as a dad, but unfulfilled as a business leader. Did you see unfulfillment everywhere, or were there certain chunks in your life where fulfillment was there?
And perfect. Thank you for asking that question. I actually was going to talk about that, but I went on a tangent right there. Yes, so I stopped drinking, and that was the second portion of all going through all that. Like I stopped drinking, and you'll really see like when you switch on your audience or you just completely you're into something new, you'll see kind of how people label you and look at you. So for me, I was the partier, I was the energetic guy, the blah blah blah, because I like to just get drunk or blacked out or be that wild one. And it was like completely different when I'm like, man, what's up with your core values and how you doing, brother? And yeah, and how you doing? Oh, I've been running the business and I've been there for the daughter and I play with her a couple hours. So I may not work, 8 hours in a day. I may do 6, I may do 4, I may pick it up at 2 in the morning here, but hey, it works for me, right? And it was something where it's like, man, you see people view you different and they're kind of thrown off. And that's where it was, it was kind of getting irritated with this situation of being around people. And we're talking about, oh, yeah, we used to do this before we got married. And oh, we used to drink all the time and do this. And it's like, really, like where does that stuff get you to, or in my case it was like I have a family, like I don't want to be talking about this nonsense that's not going to help me get to the next part. So it was finally being able to understand that number one, that's not me and who I
Sure.
am, and number
Yeah.
two, be able to be there for the family, because that's where I started building these walls again. And oh, I'm going to exclude these people, it may be family, the wife may be want to be around them, versus me being there now and being present in the moment and being like, hey, I understand you're on your journey and you're doing that, but that's not me. I do this. This is what makes me happy. You're just kind of here's the guide to other people. Again, like we in one of the things that got me to process that was like we say that like we don't like certain things and certain individuals or whatever it is, and then we kind of do it another way to somebody else in a projection. So it was something for me where it's like, yeah, we may not be fulfilled or we may not be doing the right things for us, but if something aligns to you, just be that and be the best you can be, and don't really focus on the control portion of the what you don't want to be. Just focus on who you are.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about that, but I want to kind of unpack that a little bit more because aligning with the right people is really important in our life. And it's odd that we tend to not think about that a lot of times. But I love whoever said, that you're kind of the sum of the top 5 people that you hang around with the most, and so it starts, if you're struggling with alcohol, why would you hang out at the bar with your buddies that are drinking, thinking you can just sit there and drink Diet Coke, right? So I mean, did you kind of to go back with doubting yourself is kind of where we started. I mean, did you think, oh, I can do this? Did you think I can hang around with whoever and still, be strong? Did you go through that yourself?
So yes, initially when I worked at the mortgage brokerage, it was like I don't drink, but Fridays at lunchtime I do, and that
Yeah,
was the only time I was drinking. But the problem is like I would get drunk. So we're back there at the job, we're still slamming beers and making phone calls and closing deals. So yeah, and yeah, it was in a different form then. So it was realizing,
sure,
hey, I'm done with this, being sick. And then I'd say too, it was kind of the fitness helm as well. It's like I'm talking about being all in for my body and doing all this, and I have all these injuries from the military. So why am I gonna drink? Like there's no advantage to it. I guess a glass of wine here or there won't hurt, but it was really fixing that identity and who I am, what I am, who I do type deal, to where it's like, yeah, I did that. And then it was like not having to worry about that again, kind of where your priorities lay. So for me, it was understanding that I can't drink because this baby wakes up at 5:30 in the morning sometimes.
Mhm.
So if I drink, then I'm all hungover. She's 5:30. My wife's pregnant.
Yeah,
So it's one of those where it's like the wife's not going to get up in the morning. So I'm going to be like, So luckily it was figuring out the priorities, and I get up early anyway to where it's either, latest 6 o'clock, but on a good day 3 or 4, and I'm getting a workout in before the day starts and meditating.
sure.
So it was figuring out, hey, what's important to you, how can you make it happen. Again, we're talking about showing up in life in all these areas. How do you show up for yourself first before you make that happen?
Yeah. Well, and those are really four important words of what's important to you, and I think that we tend to think that everything it's either everything's important to us or nothing's important. I mean, I don't know. I'm a black or white thinker, so I end up thinking one way or the other. And it's like, man, what's important? Is family important? Is, your physical health important? Is, being in the right state from a meditation perspective important? What is it that's important? Why do you think that we as entrepreneurs struggle so much with that? We tend to just blow by everything of ourselves. We don't sleep good. We don't eat enough, the right stuff. We just don't take care of the things that we need to sometimes until it's too late. So I'm just curious what advice you would have for someone listening right now that might be in that spot.
I love that question, brother, because that goes into the hustle grind, and what we. I know I've done that. I bet you've done it before, which were, um, when you hear. I mean, I think it could be a couple of different things. It could be like, I know some of the gurus out there, they push that as like, oh, you can work 100 hours and that. Like, no, I've done that. I've worked 100 hours a week and I've been drained and not sleeping and that. And again, like we talk about what's important to you, but like you really got to harp into that. Like for me, I got joint problems, so that's shoulders, knees, elbows, um, hips. So I'm aching all the time. So I feel bad. So I got to put the stretches in. I got to be able to work on it. We just got sick. So I went and bought 2 kettlebells and I'm doing kettlebell workouts because I can't go to the gym. But good thing is now I'm having these things around the house. So if I can't make an excuse on, oh, I can't get a workout in because I
Yeah,
definitely can. I have some tools to be able to use. So when the baby's here, and that's something that like I used to complain about. So it's really about making for you, hey, what's the best scenario? How can we make things achievable? How can I be able to do it? Like in my case, like I was getting so dialed into it to where it was like I was just building this little routine, or oh, I got 20 minutes, I could do some abs here because that's the goal and that's what it took. In our case, we need to figure out, what is the main goal and how can we make that achievable. And then two, what's going to be healthy for us as well. Is yes, you want to put that time into the business, you want to be doing that, but you need your time alone as well, working through your things, meditating, praying, whatever it has to be. Maybe you need to be around your family. Maybe you need to do something else. Maybe you need to put time in reading. So really finding all these ways that you can maximize it and add it in. And I would say for me, like just being present versus and sitting there, number one, versus two, being on my phone and be like, oh, going about that and looking up things or watching videos while I'm trying to be with the family, like complete game changer when they're like, oh, you actually remember what we're saying. You actually know you're making an effort. And it's like, before, it's not that I wasn't making an effort. It's just I was trying to get these things done for the business to where it's like, you know what, this isn't going to last forever. And I'd say too, like I take care of the little one as well during the day. So
sure.
even now it's like playing with her during the day and it's like, she's not going to be one forever. It's not going to be doing this. So I might as well take the time, not be as productive, maybe be more intentional today. And then tomorrow I can wrap this up with whatever it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, that's a word, that intentionality. That's why, I mean, I wrote my book called Growing on Purpose because I run into so many companies and people that grow by mistake. And so I think that intentionality is such an important word for somebody that's listening that maybe hasn't even thought of this stuff prior to us having this conversation right now, Alundas. Where do we start? Where does somebody start that's just not even aware of anything? This is kind of, striking a chord in their heart, but they don't know where to start. Where would you suggest that they do that?
I would say start with your core values, find out what's important to you, who you are, and so forth. So for me, I made them into an action plan, and I made it kind of as something that I look at every day. So it's looking in the mirror, saying, "Hey, am I okay with what I'm doing? Am I happy doing with what I am?" And so forth. Am I putting the work into it? And then it's being accountable because uh, I can't be able to convey that to other people if I'm not showing up for myself or doing those things, I'm morally, ethically not going to feel right, saying these things. And then again, it's, we talk about reading the books or whatever it may be, like actually applying the knowledge that you learn. Cause I know a lot of times it goes in one ear and then out through the other or
Sure.
whatever it is. We're, like we said, we're always on to the next thing and that, like, you don't think about it. So for me, it was like, reading a book, applying one thing, maybe I'm doing this. So I read How to Win Friends and Influence People a third time, and it was like, maybe I'm just going to be more intentional and genuine about my conversation. So boom, that's one thing I'm working on, to where it's like,
Sure.
yeah, this time I took something new from this book. So it's one of those to where it's like, you can always add more to your repertoire. You just got to make sure, hey, does this align to who I am? What am I doing? How am I going to be able to help other people? All right, cool. This serves me. Let's keep it. If not, don't keep it.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, I was at a clip for a while of reading like a book a month. And then I stopped and I looked back kind of as just I took a pause and I'm like, so what did you learn on that book? What did you learn on that book? And it was like, wow, I couldn't even really articulate anything that I learned on a book. And I'm just like, well, why are you doing this then? So now I'm kind of back into reading books that I've read before and just going through and find the highlighted areas, and see if they really still resonate. So, but I think core values, that's really like deep, I mean, I feel like that's like, oh, we need to get together at a men's retreat and we need to go find ourselves, I mean, is it just for you, Alundas, was it just something that you sat down and just started writing or thinking? Or, I mean, how did you sit with that and really understand what your core values were?
That's a great question. And that came into starting a business with my business partner slash mentor, Zach Babcock. So first thing he did is he was like, hey man, you're gonna write your core values out. And he sent me his, hey, this is what I stand for as a person. And then we're gonna do it on this business. What are things that are important to us? How are we gonna be able to serve people? What it is. And it was really something originally with like, we're talking about maximizing influence and getting people on podcasts that resonate with them. But it's like, yeah, anybody can do that. But it was, hey, what is it? All right, it's for the entrepreneur that's grinding in his business because he's trying to show up for his kids. He's trying to be able to be there, but he needs to be able to get on these podcasts. Maybe he doesn't want to spend 2 hours or hand that to his assistant. He wants somebody to do it for him. He shows up game day, he executes, he's good. So it was
Right.
learning the avatar and being like, oh, okay. And that's where, me writing my own core values, and then we wrote it for the company. It was something to where it's like, man, this is why we work well together, because some of the things that are important to me are important to him. It can go from a foundational standpoint to the business or to yourself personally. So for me, I did them both. And that was definitely helping me out, because it was like, man, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. Repeat them regularly to yourself, So for me, it was reading them every day. I had like 6 before, because 2 and 2s. And then it realized that that was one thing. So I don't need to say transparency and accountability, because it's really the same thing. And the way I'm saying it, so it was
Sure.
myself that, hey, you can make this applicable to yourself, for your business, definitely for training people on culture. You're going to be talking about, oh, okay, so for military, honor, courage, commitment, they say it so much that you're like ingrained into you, so it's one of those, is like, I've worked at those companies where like they keep saying these core values, what's important to them. Hey, let's take care of our people, and when you do that, that's where you create that.
So what were those? Honor, courage, and commitment? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so I was using the military, the Marine Corps, for example, is like how we can be able
Yeah.
to,
But
create things.
those 3 words, they just came off your tongue like that, right? I mean, how many times have you said that in your career? I'm assuming then that our core values, like you said, and our company values, the closer that they align, the better, right? I mean, I'm assuming that's a pretty easy scenario there.
Absolutely. And I would say, it would have to be for you, because, uh, I mean, excuse me, for me, I would not like to be able to kind of say what's important to me and then it's really not, So if I'm going to be telling somebody else, like I'm doing this, and that's kind of why I said like the company, they both intertwine, is you want to make something that's going to be achievable. But again, it's like, we're equals, so it
Sure.
doesn't make any sense if it's like something that we can abide by, but other people can't, or other people are going to abide by, but we go on and do something else. So
Yeah.
one of those is like, how are we going to do it? Well, at the same time, like, we're still a service-based industry. So we work with other people. How do we want to treat them? How do you want them to treat us? I call everybody brother. So it's one of those, is like, I share that I actually care about people, and yeah, get to know them on that personal level. Like, so do it, and
Yeah.
it's one of those where it's like, if you can get those intertwined, be able to put that personal side, like, then it's completely different. And then you could just be you, talk how you need to be able to get through versus, being real sincere and stern and causing a muck sometimes. And like, you don't need to, you can just keep personal, man. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is it, goes from the company side to where they're working with the clients and everything's just flowing because everybody's happy, making that positive impact.
Yeah. Wow. And so I'm feeling this. So this is kind of coming full circle for me. So if you start with a core value for yourself, and then you create it, or turns in, I'm talking to the entrepreneur listening, and then it turns into like your company value, which then kind of turns into your mission or vision statement, right? That's kind of flows that way. And then from there, it actually turns in, you use the word culture, and it actually turns into that culture, which then kind of also goes back to your core values. So it's kind of this circle that if you do it right, there's some real power there, because I think a lot of times, Alundas, people just don't take the time to start with core values. They don't take the time to write a mission statement. I can't say how many companies I've worked with. I'm like, what do you guys stand for? And they all kind of look at each other, and they don't, they don't want to say make a profit. They don't want to say, they don't know what to say, right? So I appreciate that it really starts with a core value of, like you did. You sat down and said, write them out. What do you stand for? And so whether it was honor, courage, and commitment, because that's what you were, taught in the military. I'm sure you probably added some along the way, maybe, as you've matured through your business world. But I just think that that's kind of a really cool way to circle that back, and it starts with that core value. Do you see most people not really utilizing core values in when you run into people? Is that why they come to you for that help?
I would say, yeah, like sometimes we know things are bad that we're doing. So like drinking or whatever it is, and the people are like, yeah, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I do it anyway, and it's like, so you understand that. The good thing is you have the awareness, so you can be able to move through it. But I think a lot of times like it is, or we move farther from what we don't want to be, or try to say that and then become closer to it, to where it's like not taking the time. And I know for me, like it was something like that. Like I was repeating history, doing the same thing, partying, and then it was just like really like, man, is this really who I am? No, it's not. I was really going through things and suppressing the emotions, so it's different than like journaling and crying it out and really trying to process these things. So it was one where it was like, man, whatever serves you, you have to deal with that, period. So it's either gonna be positive, it's gonna be negative, but you got to process it, you got to move along, get to that next point.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, is processing, because we're going so fast, we're doing so much. We got to make payroll, we got to make, the rent payment. Oh, we got all these things that we have to do. And so to stop, to get off of that gerbil wheel long enough to understand yourself is usually pretty tough for people to do that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I want to switch gears a little bit as we start to come in for a landing today. I want to talk about your podcast. So the Winner's Paradigm podcast. So you have quickly jumped to in the top 2.5% of business podcasts in the world. Congratulations on that. That's a great place to be. What I was going to ask you, who's your favorite guest? I listened to some and I was like, wow, these are some really cool people. And I just didn't know if you had one. We won't tell them that they were your favorite, but I just was curious if there was any in your journey so far that really stuck out for you.
I would say one, Tony Watley, just because I like him as a amazing individual already, and it's kind of one of those to where he has a humorous side. So he puts like on Facebook and he's like, yeah, if you ask me for advice, be ready to set to pay the ticket or something like that. And I was like, hey brother, so quick question, like just messing with them. And it's one of those where it's like they mentor you and they start working with you. So I put out
Sure,
a post one day and I'm like, yeah, I have 40 episodes in the vault. And he's like, you know what, that's not always good for timeliness, and start teaching me, different ways. Or maybe I thought about some, again, going back to one of the things we talked about, you like knowing
sure.
something, but you're like, oh, this is what's gonna work. This is it. and then you realize it's not the most effective, efficient way to reach into the audience or even create that relationship. So something for me where I was like, man, just having a guest that you can use on the regular, message him if you have any questions. Like, really great human being. Love his work that he does and his coaching, his podcast.
That's awesome. So cool. So for those listening, it's the Winner's Paradigm podcast. And are you publishing every week? Is that pretty much what you're doing?
Absolutely. So I'm doing every week now until next year, and then it's going to be 2 episodes next year.
Wow, nice. Get aggressive on that. Cool. So for the person listening, as we wrap this up today, I just want to say that I try and say every week, there's usually a message in that, that is intertwined through our discussion. And usually people pick up on whatever it is. There are different people hear different things. So, I just encourage you, rather than jump into your next activity, rather than stop and say, hey, great podcast, and get back into your day, whether you're going for a walk or driving, whatever. I just want to encourage you to kind of sit for a minute and really think about what, Alundas said here, so that you're able to, the last 30 minutes is actually life-changing. It can be something that can improve and enhance your life, rather than it just be fill for sound. I really want it to make a difference in your life. And that's why we do these each week. And, you can tell from Alundas, he's super passionate about what he does. Couldn't even imagine what that dude's like in the weight room. It's probably scary to watch. So I'm glad that I don't get to see that, because it would make me look like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? So, but I love the passion. I love everything that's here. So if somebody does want to learn more about you, if somebody does want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yes, sir. So best way is going to be Alundas_Havens on social media. And then the Winner's Paradigm podcast, you can find that anywhere podcasts are. So easiest ways to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for your service. And, thank you for taking on that name, Bam Bam. I couldn't even imagine. Was that a positive name throughout the military, or was that not a positive? How did you take that?
No, it definitely was a positive, because it was like an inside joke to the people who knew. And that's kind of the cool thing about when they give you nicknames, is like people don't know unless they know the real story. So they kind of did that. And then two, it kind of brings the friendlier side. So it
Sure.
was one of those, even getting introduced to people, because I was always I was an E46 position, but we're building a squadron unit up from the ground. So really going through writing SOPs, and we're jumping in like what's important to the unit and how we're going to make mission happen. And I did it for the operations and training side. So learning a lot of things. So it was one of those where it's like, even if one of my friends introduced me to another high ranking member, that can be like, oh, Bam Bam. And then it's one of those like, oh, okay, he knows this person. Okay, cool. And go on to the next thing or yeah, and so forth.
Wow, that's so cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing in mindset work. It's a great place for us to really take an inventory of what our mindset is about ourselves and about people around us. What's our mindset for our team? What's our mindset for our company? And realistically, I think the one often overlooked is, what's the mindset for our customer? What do we really want them to, what do we want their mindset to be? So thank you so much for sharing this with us today. And again, thank you for your service. And I look forward to keep watching all that you're going to be doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. It was a tremendous honor, and I love jamming with you today, brother.
Take care.